Let's talk about managing materials in the material editor graph versus in the 3D scene. The key concept here is that there is no hard relationship between the two. Just because a material exists in the material editor graph does not mean that it's assigned to an object, and vice versa. Just because a material is on an object does not mean it's loaded into the graph. The graph is just a sandbox. It's important to understand this fully to avoid data loss when periodically clearing out the graph by deleting nodes. Let's just organize our view a little bit, make this easier to see. I'll zoom in with Control-Alt middle mouse and pan with the middle mouse button. At the top right of each node is a minimize button. We can click that to collapse that node and make it smaller, take up less space on the screen. We can do that for multiple selected nodes as well. I'll back out again and select this entire shader tree for the floor, which includes a bunch of map nodes as well. In the Material Editor menu, choose View, Open Close Selected Nodes, and then click off to deselect. We can automatically lay out the graph. There's a button on the toolbar, Lay Out All Vertical. That automatically lays out the graph so the materials are organized in a single column. We could also do Lay Out Horizontal from the flyout, and then the materials will be organized in a single row. Let's go back to Lay Out All Vertical. We can also make these material samples a little bit larger and easier to see. Double-click on the sample image, not the name, but the image, and that will maximize that sample. We can do the same for this leather material. Double-click on that. And by the way, when we maximize the material sample, we also load the parameters in. Okay, both of these materials are currently instanced into the scene. So for example, if I change the base color weight for leather cream rough and bring that down to 0, I've essentially disabled the diffuse component on that sofa object. So there is a relationship between this material and the scene because that material is instanced in the scene. And kind of paradoxically, if we delete an instanced material from the graph, we actually don't change the scene. So if I select that leather material and press delete, I've cleared it out from the graph, but I have not changed the state of the material on the sofa object. If I ever need to get that material back, I can scroll down in the material map browser, and way down in here we'll see scene materials. This is a list of all of the materials that are currently assigned onto objects. And here it is, leather cream rough. I can just drag that back into the graph. And at this point I can choose to keep it as an instance and edit the version of the material that is currently assigned to objects, or I can choose copy and make a variation. So instancing is what we just saw. Let's try copy and click OK. Double click on that material and we'll call it something else. We'll call it leather brown and change the base color. Maybe reduce the value down to about 0.1 or so, or even lower. Click OK, and we can double click on that sample to make that larger. So I've made a variation, but I have not assigned it to any objects. So I would need to select these objects and assign just as we did in the previous movie. Because this material in the graph is not assigned to anything, if I delete this now, I will permanently erase it. So if I select that and press delete, it's gone, because it was not assigned to any scene material and it was not stored anywhere else. When you delete something from the graph, it may or may not be deleted from the actual scene depending upon what you delete. So if I select this floor material, the top level material, not any of the maps that are attached to it, if I select that material and press delete, nothing changed in my view over here, even though that floor was instanced into the scene. But what I've done actually is I've left a whole bunch of garbage behind. All these map nodes are just sort of floating here. So I can clear all that out, go back up to the menus and choose Edit, Clear View. And we get a warning, all nodes will be deleted. That's fine. Click Yes, and now we've got a clean slate once again. Now if you delete a map from the graph, then that is a destructive act. So I'll bring the floor back over. I'll click and drag on the floor material, drag it over, and this time choose Instance, and click OK. And again, if I delete the top level material, in this case the physical material, I will not change my scene. But if I delete any of these other nodes here, then that will be a destructive act that does affect the material that's instanced to the scene. So to illustrate, I'll drag a selection rectangle around all those maps and press Delete, and I've just wiped out all of the maps. So it's pretty tricky. If you delete a material that is instanced to the scene, then you will not erase that material in the scene. But if you delete some map or other component of a material, then that's going to edit the structure of the instanced material, and in turn that's going to affect whatever you have in your scene. Okay, so I'll undo that deletion with the Undo button. And that's an illustration of the relationship between the Material Editor node graph and the materials in the scene.